This is Andy Purewal for ID Boxing. I'm joined by Matchroom's Frank Smith here at the Fight Hotel in Nottingham. Frank, it's been a while since I've last actually seen you, so how's things been going?
Good. I've been in Istanbul getting a hair transplant.
That was something I was going to bring up. The hat is.
Seen me. That's why you haven't seen me. I've been in hiding.
We'll see how long it takes until people jump onto that one. But here we are, Nottingham, Wood-Lara on Saturday night, tomorrow night now. A fight which everybody's just expecting to catch fire immediately. Are you no different, Frank? Do you expect this one to be a firefight for as long as it lasts?
Yeah, look, a great fight, a great way to start the year for us in the UK. Obviously everyone was very excited for this one back in September when it was originally planned for. Lee unfortunately had to withdraw with injury, but massive fight. And you got to give it to Lee Wood. He picked Mauricio Lara. It wasn't a mandatory. This was a voluntary. He picked to face Mauricio Lara. No one else really wants to fight. We've all seen what Lara can do, and it's going to be, I think, whichever way this goes, it's going to be an interesting fight while it lasts. A lot of people say Mauricio Lara could go in there in the first couple of rounds and stop Lee Wood, but then Lee Wood also has the power to do that to Mauricio Lara. So it's one of those fights that we can't wait for, and it's definitely built up this week as well. There's a lot of tension between the two of them. I can't wait to see it.
Do you think that just comes with Bronco Lara, where when he's travelling over and he's in fights such as these, as we saw with Josh Warrington, he loves that side to the business, the trash talking, the back and forth?
Yeah, he's very good at it. It's a shame Lee Wood doesn't speak Spanish, to be honest.
Bronco Lara doesn't speak English.
Yeah, but it always sounds a bit. It's like when Conor Benn used to do it. It always sounds a bit better, doesn't it, when it's in Spanish? But no, even without even with the lack of English and Spanish between the two of them, it's been an interesting build-up. So I think there's going to be a lot of fire in there come Saturday night. They've been building up for this for a long time. Mauricio Lara says that Lee Wood pulled out without an injury, I think, last time. But he wanted this fight, as I said, and he picked Mauricio Lara as an opponent. So he obviously sees what some people don't see.
Both men have eyed a future Josh Warrington. Obviously, Lara's fought him twice. Granted, the second one stopped earlier, and for Lee, it'd be a huge fight at the City Ground. Is that, in your eyes, and as what Eddie said earlier, it's very much so whoever comes through will be in firm position to secure that Josh Warrington fight?
Yeah, look, I think that's a massive fight. Either way, Mauricio Lara against Josh Warrington or Lee Wood against Josh Warrington. Huge fight. Lee Wood's obviously dreamed to fight at the City Ground. That's definitely a focus for us. And as you say, Mauricio Lara, we've done it twice against Josh Warrington already. The second one didn't go quite to plan. But that's a massive fight as well. There's a lot of big fights out there in that division as well. You look at even Kiko Martinez, who's going to fight the IBF mandatory fight. You've got Michael Conlon as well. I think that there's talk about him fighting Lopez. Lopez, who beat Josh Warrington, but Michael Conlon and Lopez both with top rank. There's a lot of interesting fights to be made there, and I think it's going to be an interesting year or so in that division.
Frank, moving away from the main event, just touch on the rest of the card. You have the likes of Gary Cully back out. This fight, talk to me about it. What are you hoping from him and the future moving towards the show in Ireland?
Yeah, look, I think it's Gary Cully. He had a great win last time out. Brilliant stoppage in that fight. Obviously had a great win in Nottingham as well when he fought Vasquez on the Conlon Wood undercard. What was that? Nearly a year ago now. So for him, the focus is get Saturday night out of the way, another test, and then move on to May 20th into an even bigger test. We got high hopes for Gary in Dublin for the next few years to build up some big shows around him. That's the focus for him. You got Dalton Smith as well, making the second defence of his British title. A win on Saturday night. We hope to announce a headline show for him as well. Then you got Chev Clarke, who I think has really pushed on. From that group of amateurs that came through, I think he's really performed. Out of all of them, I think he's done a great job and got a massive future. Unfortunate about Dex Spellman, obviously our thoughts with him, but we've managed to make a great fight for Chev. Gamal Yafai's back out. Janae Boston, who's a very real exciting talent. Aaron Bowen makes his professional debut. Kieran Conway as well on the card. It's a stacked card from top to bottom, and looking forward to getting started.
Just touch on some of the fights further. Obviously, Chev Clarke returning, always bring action, always an exciting fighter. He comes through Israel Dufus, and you look towards the future again. what could be in line for him? And I asked Eddie this, get your thoughts. Obviously, you've got a brilliant fight between Jordan Thompson and Luke Watkins later on in the year. How far off do you think maybe a Chev Clarke and Jordan Thompson fighters? I know you'll have plans for both of them to reach world level in their own paths, but domestically, beneath, say, the recognised the Colleys, Riakpors and what have you, that could be an unbelievable fight.
Yeah, look. One thing about Chev, he's moving quickly. He's supposed to be in 6 or 8 rounds still now, and he wanted to move fast, and that's been the focus for him. So, I think it's a tough fight tomorrow night for him. But if he comes through this well, we want to move very quickly. I've spoken to him a lot around the plans, and he doesn't want to hold back. Obviously, Jordan Thompson fighting Luke Watkins, which is a good fight. Jordan's learning a lot under Tony Sims as well. But you're right, I still need to work up to that position out around the names of, you mentioned around the Cully, Riakpor, etc. So, but I think there's a big opportunity there. Could that be a fight down the line? Possibly. You'd maybe say Jordan's a bit further on, but Chev definitely wants to move a lot quicker. So let's see.
And you mentioned Dalton Smith as well. Beyond Saturday and Billy Allington, we know that you've got the Sheffield card on the horizon. A lot of talk about Sam Maxwell. Eddie said that it's a fight which would make sense provided both come through tomorrow night. With that in mind, Sam Maxwell, talk to me about that as a potential bout for Sheffield.
Yeah, look, I think it's a good headline bout. They're both focused on what they've got tomorrow night. Dalton obviously against Allington. The key is for Dalton is to keep the momentum and keep building. Headliner show in Sheffield. Obviously, you got the Terry Harper Cecilia Breakhouse fight as well, which is a brilliant fight. Glad we can make that happen, and some good other local fights on the card as well. So hopefully be able to announce something on that tomorrow or Sunday.
It was obviously a huge fight to secure the future of Dalton Smith this year, Frank, and you've done so. What comes with that? The pressures of delivering for him. What exactly have his team said to you guys? Said to Matchroom? If he's signing back with you guys, this is what we expect.
Yeah, look, obviously, for Dalton, he's a huge star and someone we wanted to keep hold of. We feel like we've done a good job together up to this point. The focus for him was in the short term to win the British title outright, and hopefully, by end of April, he'll have that done. And then a big step up fight towards the end of this year. With the long term aim to fighting at Hillsborough. And that's the aim over the next 12 to sort of 16 months with Dalton, is to get him in a place for that. In order to do that, we have to build him in all level, in all areas. There's been a big media push with him. Our team have been working closely with him, and that's really the focus for us now. He's got to deliver in the ring, but outside the ring, we've got to deliver as well and keep building his profile. So when we get to the point of Hillsborough, we're confident that we can sell it out. So that's the focus. He's a star in the ring, and we have to continue building him to make him a star outside the ring.
Away from his card, Frank, there's a few other topics to touch on. Joshua Franklin, we had the announcement press conference last week, I believe. Yeah, last week now, yeah. A week's passed, and a lot of people kind of touching on AJ's comments in the press where he mentioned money being his motivation, not a side we've seen to him throughout his career. Was it a surprise to you at the time, or maybe since, that it's what he chose to go for as his motivation? We've always heard him talk about wanting to become world champion again, wanting to prove he's the best in the division again. Was it a surprise to you that's what he said was his motivation these days?
Did anyone really follow up with him and ask him whether he actually meant it?
To be fair, I never interviewed him, so I can't.
Yeah, look, one thing I will say is most people's motivation, the reality is money. You do what you do for money. We all do it because we all want to do something we enjoy, but at the same time, alongside that, you want to make money. He's still committed. It's not just money. He's got a lot of money. He's still committed to the sport. Why you wouldn't move to Dallas to and continue training and take the punishment fighters do? It's a very tough sport, probably one of the toughest sports out there. If your only motivation was money, because the man's done very well. So there's a lot more behind it. Yes, I'm sure like I say, everyone's got an interest in making money, but there's a lot more behind it. You wouldn't consider. He wants to keep evolving, keep growing in the sport, and he never wants to stand still. He always wants to take chances, and that's one thing I respect with him is he could stop tomorrow. His life would be lovely, amazing, but he still has dreams and aspirations in the sport.
The Jermaine Franklin fight is an interesting one. Obviously, we saw what he produced against Dillian Whyte. A lot of people felt that he had done enough to secure a win against Dillian Whyte back in November. With that in mind, if AJ produces what people talk about, that explosive performance, gets back to what we saw a few years back, talk of a Dillian Whyte rematch, does that become almost a bit more of a difficult sell? Because if AJ blitzes Franklin, Dillian went a hard 12 rounds, is it a hard sell then?
I honestly don't think so, because I think you look at the two of them, and whatever happens in a fight between Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua, it's a tear-up. There's that long-standing, long-term sort.
Do you think that definitely would happen though, in terms of that's how they would approach fight? Because we saw a different version of Dillian against Jermaine.
Look, I'm not a fighter, obviously, but I think when you've got that, like what we saw in that second fight, like that, what built up between the two of them. I know they've changed as people, and we see them now and they'll say hello, but still, when you're fighting each other, what we saw in that second fight, the build up to that second fight, everything that was around it, that after the first round when everyone was in the ring, like there was fire in that fight. And I think there will always be fire in that fight, regardless of whether we can say hello, but there will always be that. And I think that makes it, and I think, it's hard to compare this fight to that fight, and because he did this, he did that. So many things have happened in fights where you could do that, and there's so many different results. But I still personally think it's a massive fight, and people will be very interested by it. And I think, like I say, it only really goes one way between those two.
And again, just sticking with AJ, and another fight which has been linked with him is the Tyson Fury one. I think those two will always be mentioned together. Tyson, he either wants a fight or he doesn't. Currently, he's at the, very much so, AJ is at the back of his mind, and he said that he's dead in his eyes. Just your thoughts on Tyson's most recent comments?
He says that today, maybe tomorrow he changes his mind. It doesn't really matter, because AJ's got Jermaine Franklin to focus on. Tyson has hopefully got Usyk to focus on, so it doesn't matter. Today it doesn't matter what they want to do in 3 months' time. They've got to do both of their own individual fights first, and I'm sure Tyson will change his mind one day and say actually he wants to fight him, and then go back the other way as well. Let's deal with it at the time. There's a lot of talking in this sport, isn't there? So it's just focus on what they've actually got ahead of them, and then go from there. And it's a huge fight. Everyone would love to see that fight happen. I'd love to see the Deontay Wilder fight happen as well. I think that's a massive fight. So there's so many big opportunities to be made, and I think less talking, more action. Get these fights out of the way, and then go from there.
Frank, you've obviously spent a great deal of time out in Saudi Arabia working on shows, and I'm sure you will do in the future as well. Was it a surprise to you to hear that Fury-Usyk won't land in Saudi Arabia now?
Yeah, I think, and I read something before, I think Bob Arum and Frank Warren said that Usyk had done his deal in Saudi Arabia, so he'd obviously got to happy terms, commercial terms that made sense for him. It was more Fury's side, and I don't know what I wasn't involved in it, but I can, I think what's going to be difficult now, understanding the commercial aspects of the business, is getting Usyk to a point where he's happy financially, because what he would have accepted, whatever deal he got from Saudi Arabia for that fight, it's very difficult to replicate that for him at Wembley. That's the reality. Doesn't mean that it's not the value of it, because the value is what someone's willing to pay. But if you've been offered £20 and you go, okay, I accept the £20, subject to this guy accepting whatever number he accepts, and then I come back to you and say, actually, it's only £10 to do it here, you're going to go, well, I've got 20 here. That, I think it's going to be difficult. But hopefully they can make it happen. Everyone wants to see the undisputed fight, so we'd love to see it, but let's see.
Alice Crash here, because adamant it has to be 50-50 going into Wembley negotiations. Your thoughts on that, and how much of a sticking point, just kind of sticking with what you've just said, that could be as well?
Yeah, I agree with a 50-50. Look, is Fury probably commercially bigger? Yes, but it's the undisputed fight. It takes both of them to get in there and to create this moment. But I think, like I say, it's difficult where Usyk, the most difficult point is Usyk would have accepted X, and 50% probably doesn't come to that X, I would guess. So at that point, he's already losing out, because Tyson wanted Y. I don't know what Y was, but that, So I think I'm glad I'm not involved.
Frank, just sticking with the heavyweight division, we saw that IBF officially order Hrgovic and Ruiz purse bids. A surprise because everybody's expecting to see Ruiz-Wilder progress. Have you had anything on the Hrgovic team front? Do you think we will see Hrgovic-Ruiz instead?
I think it's a good fight. I think maybe Ruiz would look at Hrgovic as maybe off the back of the Zhang fight as a bit of an easier task than the Wilder fight. Both gets them a mandatory position, but let's see. Wilder's obviously a massive fight against Deontay Wilder commercially as well, so we have to see how it plays out. Purse bids are set for next Friday, I think it is, or Thursday, for the IBF for the Hrgovic-Ruiz one. So talks ongoing in the background for that.
So talks have begun, and you are exploring that to see if you can be done.
Yeah, conversations obviously between us, Tom Brown, the Sauerlands, who we work with in Wasserman Boxing with Philip Hrgovic. So we're working through it in the background currently. So in the next few days, hope to have an update.
Frank, seen Sean Gibbons floating about the fight week. I saw him in New York as well for the Serrano bout a couple of weeks ago now. A lot of talk about Ben Pacquiao. There's no denying commercially it can be a huge fight, you can make a great deal of money from it, and it will draw eyes because of the names involved. But there's been a lot of criticism in the background from sports fans because Pacquiao hasn't fought for 2 years. He's obviously focused on his political career. Do you understand why there have been those criticisms attached with the talks about a potential bout there?
Yeah, I think the bigger criticisms come around the Conor Benn situation, which is still ongoing. Look, Manny Pacquiao is a star of the sport. You see the names he's been in there with, the fights he's had. He still wants to keep on going. And Conor Benn wants the biggest fights. I think the focus right now around that is Conor Benn is working to clear his name. And that's the key part. Is that a fight that interests us? As you say, commercially it's a very big fight, and a fight that can be made, and something we're definitely looking at for down the line.
Everybody was expecting an announcement from the WBC about 10 to 14 days ago now, Frank. We haven't had that. Are you guys expecting anything imminently? Because, again, going back to what I'd asked Eddie, he said he was, but imminently doesn't seem to be as imminent as what we'd hoped.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot going on in the background, a lot of work and a lot of people involved from all different sides. As you say, 10 to 14 days ago, we were hoping for something. We're sort of in the same boat. We're waiting. Conor's legal team are working through it currently. Conor's focus is to clear his name. That's always been his focus. I think, as I've said before, he could have boxed a day after October 8th, a week after October 8th, somewhere else, if that's what he wanted to do. But his focus was always to clear his name, and that's what it continues to be. This has gone on for a long time. It's been the hardest period, obviously, in Conor's life, what he's had to go through, and I think he wants to get moving and get back doing what he loves. So hopefully there is something soon. But yeah, lots going on in the background between the various parties.
We've seen Robert Smith become a lot more vocal in recent weeks as well, speaking to various media outlets. Frank, from your perspective and from Matchroom's perspective, was it a surprise to you? Has it been a surprise seeing him speak out on certain topics around the kind of situation?
Yeah, it is, because he doesn't really speak out on anything, ever. So, look, the British Boxing Board of Control, I haven't seen the full interview he did with Simon Jordan and Spencer, so I can't comment. I don't want to say something stupid and then someone goes, well, he didn't say that, because then it's a bit pointless. The bits I did see were around the time periods. The British Boxing Board of Control had all the info when we had all the info. Their job as the licensing and sanctioning organisation for the sport of boxing in the UK is to run and license and set the rules for the sport of boxing. They had all the information for a period of time and decided 3 days out or 2 days out not to sanction the fight. That's their right to do so. If they would have done that 7 weeks before, we would have been in this, we would have gone, okay, and we would have spent a lot less money. So, we've obviously, as a business, taken a lot of a hit for it, and Eddie as well. But the British Boxing Board of Control, it's their job to license the sport of boxing here. They were doing the investigation, not us. We don't, we're not involved in that investigation. The British Boxing Board of Control were. They made their decision. So, you have to look at the time frames they work towards as well. and you know how it took them that period of time. As I say, if 7 weeks before or 6 or whenever the time frame was, they would have said no, the fight's not happening. We know what we're dealing with then, and it would have been a different story altogether.
Frank, just one more around Conor Benn. We saw Chris Eubank Jr. has activated his rematch clause with Liam Smith. A surprise to you? Obviously, I know again you've got certain ties with the Eubank family, but on the back of what we saw in Manchester at the end of January, is it a surprise to you he's opted to go and invoke that?
No, look, I think he will still believe in his mind he can beat Liam Smith. Liam Smith, obviously, a lot of people doubted Liam Smith, but a lot of people knew the ability Liam Smith had and what he would take in there. It's a great fight. It's a big fight. Let's see. I'm sure there's still a long way to go. I'm sure there's still a lot of discussions to be had, and I'm not involved in, so I'll stay out the way of all that. But he's a very proud man as well, I'm sure, Chris, and his focus will want to be to get back in there and avenge his defeat. So let's see.
If he was to fight Liam again and lose, does that end, in your opinion, the possibilities of the Conor Benn fight, or how much smaller does that fight become? Because in that time, obviously, Conor's had to spend X amount of time outside of the ring dealing with his ongoing investigation, and then Junior would have suffered back-to-back defeats to the same man.
Yeah, look, I think there's a whole thing around a loss in the sport sort of ending people's careers, and I think it comes back to delivering the best possible fights, and fights that interest the people and the fans. There's still a market for that fight, regardless. There will always be a market for that fight. Some fights will always live on and have a market regardless of losses. Don't get me wrong though, does it change people's mind? Probably changes people's mindsets after one loss in some ways. But I still think there will always be that there. I personally think that if Conor Benn was in a position where he was cleared tomorrow, I think the Conor Benn Chris Eubank fight makes the most sense now. But we have to see. But as you say, he's invoked his right to the rematch, and we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out.
One final one, Frank, before I let you go. We spoke about Saudi Arabia earlier on. Boxing returns rather, to the Kingdom next week. Jake Paul, Tommy Fury. Just your thoughts as that edge is ever closer.
Yeah, I think Jake Paul's travelled out. No, Tommy Fury's travelled out there now, hasn't he? So it's happening. Looks like it's close.
There's still a week left, so anything can happen.
It's the closest it's ever been to happening. Look, it's an interesting fight. It's going to captivate the audience interest. It's become a lot bigger over time, hasn't it? And who would have thought it would have been cancelled about 3 times and we'd finally be here? But I'm quite intrigued. Do you know what? To be honest, I've never watched a lot of Tommy Fury, but the natural mindset is actually he's Tyson's brother. He must be a really good boxer, and he's grown up in boxing. But Jake Paul's, for all the hate and stick he gets, he's put his mind to it, and he's giving it a real go. So it's going to be intriguing. I'm not even going to pick a winner. Who do you think?
I think boxing wins, Frank. That's my. I'm not sure yet.
Well, come on, you say who you think.
Frank, we can leave that there now. Leave to enjoy the rest of your evening. I appreciate your time, though. Thank you for speaking to me in ID Boxing.
Good to speak. Enjoy sitting on that fence. Tune in tomorrow night. Lee Wood, Mauricio Lara, live on DAZN. Am I allowed to plug it? Probably delete that bit at the end, won't you?
That will stay in there. Thank you, Frank.